Hi, everybody. My name is Zach Meyer. I am a psychotherapist here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I want to talk to you today about teens. In my 15 years doing this, I have focused my practice primarily on teens because I remember being one and it was hard. I mean, seriously, it's a pretty pivotal transitional period in life where you are doing the work of no longer being a child and being ready to be an adult. It's a lot. And so my work with teens, I consider it to be preventative care. If I can help them figure some stuff out now, they are going to be set up way better for success as an adult. So in this video, I kind of want to talk to parents and I want to set the scene. I want to describe the situation and describe to you some things that you need to be thinking about as parents of teens that you might not be. And I want to convince you of why it's really important to think of these things. So my oldest child is 11, and I have friends my age who had kids a little earlier than I did, and they are teenagers right now. So let's assume that if you have a teenager or teenagers, that you are of a certain age that is probably about 40 or older, thereabouts. Each of us, when we get old enough to have our own kids and raise our own teenagers, I promise you, by that point in your life, you are raising humans in a world that did not exist when you were a teenager. Let me say that again. By the time each of us are old enough to raise teenagers, we are raising teenagers in a world that did not exist when we were younger. And the significance of that cannot be overstated, because whatever insights or life lessons or habits we formed, whatever practices we have established from when we were young that kind of helped us navigate the world might no longer apply. And you need to be open to that possibility if you want to help your teens succeed. So let's talk about what was different when you and I were teens. When we were teens, there was no on-demand entertainment. There was Blockbuster, but there was no way to watch whatever we watched right when we wanted to watch it. In fact, you and I both know you would often go to Blockbuster and they'd be out of the movie you wanted to watch. They'd be out of the top 5 movies you wanted to watch. You know what I'm talking about. When you and I were teens, there was no social media, period. It wasn't a thing. It didn't exist. When you and I were teens, the internet was just a baby. I mean, it existed, but it barely knew how to walk. So it was kind of a novelty. For example, if you had a paper to write, you weren't even allowed to use only internet sources, right? You had to physically go to the library and show your work and tell your teacher about the 5 books that you looked in, right? So we really didn't have access to the internet in the way that our teens have access now. When you and I were students in middle school and high school, which would have been in the late 80s, the 90s, that kind of thing, we carried physical textbooks, right? We went to the mall and bought CDs. We taped songs off the radio. We regularly engaged with the physical world for academic or social or leisure purposes all the time. When we were teens, if we wanted to talk to our friends, we would either talk to them at school, we would ride our bike to their house to have a conversation with them, or we would call them on the phone. These are all very immediate, if not face-to-face, definitely real-time ways to talk to someone. And finally, when you and I were teens, we engaged in extracurriculars for fun. I mean, I did theater because I was a hopeless athlete, but I had friends who were on the basketball team, soccer team, football team. They did it because they liked it. It was fun. They enjoyed playing those sports. I enjoyed being in theater and choir. Thank you very much. But I did those things because I liked them. And you probably did too. By contrast, your teens' landscape is very, very, very different. They are inundated with entertainment options. As of 2018, a full 95% of middle and high school students either have a smartphone or have access to one. That means that they are inundated with entertainment options. They can watch whatever they want, whenever they want, with or without your permission, with or without your knowledge, most likely. Your teens know what social media is and are likely on many platforms of social media or feel the pressure to be. And this is a really kind of crazy paradox that they find themselves in, because research shows that adolescents who do not have access to social media, who cannot connect with their peers in that way, suffer socially because of it. They are out of the loop, and it causes psychological distress to them and impacts their relationships negatively in measurable ways. However, research also shows that teens who are on social media are negatively impacted psychologically, emotionally, in terms of how they feel about their appearance and their abilities in their lives. So our kids are literally damned if they do and damned if they don't when it comes to social media. There's no great way through social media or around it. It just kind of sucks. I forgot to mention this one earlier, but when we were kids, video games were definitely a thing, and they were awesome, but they were a thing that happened usually gathered with friends around one television screen, right? And you got your 32 pixels in the bottom left corner when you were playing Bond. And that's what you had to look at. You had to kind of make out what was going on in that tiny square. Now, video gaming is decentralized. Your teens can play the same game on multiple platforms, either with friends in the room, or a friend down the street, or a stranger across the globe. Now, we know there are actually some psychological benefits to this, especially for males, for boys. They tend to have a lot of meaningful bonding experiences playing video games with friends. And that's great. But we also know that people who struggle to find a community, a peer group that they feel like they can belong to and are accepted by in their kind of immediate world, at their school, in their neighborhood, they'll go online and they will look to gaming communities. And while we know they can find acceptance and belonging there, we also know that there are some predatory people there who are looking to radicalize young, impressionable, lonely kids into some pretty off the beaten path ideologies. And this happens all the time because kids desperate for a place to belong and be accepted will accept some pretty wild ideologies if that's what it takes. The internet is now everywhere. It's in your pocket. It might be on your watch. It might be on your refrigerator. I mean, it's everywhere. And its ever-presentness causes some pretty serious developmental challenges for your teens. Let me explain. Do you remember being a kid, being a teen, and just wondering about something, not having all the answers, but being left to kind of not know something? There's really good things that happen when we don't know something. Either we use our imagination or we talk to someone about it. But kids these days can find out anything they want on the internet. Now, this is really cool if you're researching something academic. I mean, I've had to help teenage clients pick their jaws up off the floor when I tell them about physically going to the library to do research for a paper at school. They just don't believe me that was a thing I did, but I did. But sometimes it's downright dangerous or traumatic because you can look up anything on the internet. You can look up websites that encourage you in your eating disorder to not eat. You can look up instructions on how to end your life. And of course, you can look up any kind of adult or explicit media you want, which we'll talk about a bit later. But one of my clients probably summed this up best for me when he was telling me about how he imagines in the past that if you wanted to know something as a teen that was maybe kind of sensitive, maybe, something about how your body worked or how relationships work, or something else, I don't know, you had to talk to someone about it. You had to have an awkward conversation with a safe adult. And sometimes the thought of that awkward conversation made you go, I don't really need to know that. I'd like to, but not enough to have that conversation. So you would just not know. But this client told me now, as a teen, as a kid even, you can know anything you want. All you do is Google it, and you don't even have to involve a responsible, caring adult. You can just bypass them and ask the internet. And as a parent, I hope that troubles you. It should, because as a parent of a teen, you still have this role in their lives to kind of help shepherd them and guide their exposure to and exploration of what's out in the world. That naturally kind of wanes as they get older, and then when they're 18 and they launch, you're kind of out of the picture. But because of the internet, we are being removed as parents from that equation much earlier, probably earlier than we should, earlier than is safe to do so. Your teens live largely in a virtual world. And by that I mean the ways that they engage with each other, the ways that they communicate with each other, even their close friends, are often no longer face-to-face. They might be FaceTiming, so they're having this kind of real-time conversation, but they're removed. They're not in the same room. And if they're texting, if they're messaging, those are curated conversations. Those are conversations in which your teen can kind of think about what was just said to them, take some time to think about what they want to say in response. It is not a real-time, real-world face-to-face thing. And sometimes that's great. I mean, the same could be said about our grandparents writing love letters to each other, right? That's a curated way of talking to each other. It's not real time. We're choosing our best words and putting our best foot forward. But that is the majority of your teens' communication with their peers. They don't get together in a real world way with friends to engage with media like you might have done when you were younger. I remember being a kid and certain records coming out or certain movies coming out, and me and my friends, we would get together to experience that together, right? Someone would buy a copy of that album, and we would get together and we would listen to it together and talk about it and interact and react and stuff. We would go to the theater together to watch a movie. Your kids are engaging with media just out of the air. They're streaming stuff. They're probably doing it alone. They might be talking about it, but they're not engaging with it together. And they're certainly not engaging with physical media. They're streaming it. Their video games are these immersive worlds where, there isn't just one task. You don't just beat the game once in a matter of hours. You can spend days exploring this virtual world. And I've had plenty of teens tell me that they prefer the virtual world of their favorite online game because they can control it. Because if they die, they can regenerate and try it again. There are less consequences in these virtual worlds. I mean, because of COVID, even our teens' schooling has been virtual for these last couple of years, right? They've been through entire classes where they've never met the teacher face-to-face, where they've never set foot in the classroom. That's crazy. That is a very detached way to be engaging with these very important things that matter, right? Can you imagine being in high school and not attending your classes, but just kind of logging in to do so? It's crazy to me, but it's reality for our teens. Now, there are obvious benefits to some of this virtual stuff. I mean, without the benefit of being able to connect virtually over the internet, our kids would have had to pause school these last couple of years. And it's probably nice that they didn't have to. But what's gone on is that the mental muscles required for engaging with the real world, engaging with people face to face, having real-time conversations, those mental muscles have kind of atrophied for our teens. And I've heard from several clients that just the thought of a face-to-face conversation that might be required to go get a job, talk to a teacher after school, have a difficult conversation with a friend. The thought of those things stir up tons of anxiety for my clients because they don't have to do those kinds of things. They don't have to have those kind of conversations very often. But you and I know as adults that those are kind of important skills to be able to have, right? In the workplace, with a spouse, with a partner. So in not practicing those skills, our teens are really kind of losing out on some essential life skills. Our teens feel a pressure to succeed academically and probably to go to college in a way that you and I did not experience. And I'm going to throw some statistics at you, okay? For American middle schoolers, 61% admitted to feeling a lot of pressure to get good grades. For high schoolers, 75% report, quote, often or always feeling stressed by their schoolwork. The percentage of Americans who have graduated from college has doubled in the last 30 years. Now, you might think, well, that's great. We're more educated. Yeah. But college is no longer talked about as this option after high school. It is talked about kind of the logical or essential next step. And that was already happening when we were younger. It's worse now. I can't tell you how many middle schoolers I have talked to in therapy where one of their primary concerns is the stress they feel about, are their grades in 7th grade good enough to get them into the college they need to get in to have the kind of career that would make their parents happy? That's nuts. And if you're that kind of parent, I'm sorry, that's nuts. These students are not engaging in anything in high school for fun. They don't enjoy their classes. They don't enjoy their extracurriculars. They're not in them to meet people and let off steam and kind of have some diverse experiences. They are in them to pad their college resumes, or they're in a sport to try to get some kind of scholarship or funding for when they go to college, because the cost of college is exploding and they're anxious about this thing they feel like they have to do but don't know how they're going to realistically afford. As a result of this kind of pressure, between 2009 and 2015, college counseling centers saw a 30% increase in the number of students who were utilizing their services, even though enrollment only increased by 5% over the same amount of time. So only a few more students are making it to college, but they are stressed. Even once they've kind of like, whew, I made it into college, they are stressed. And probably one of the best statistics to talk about can be talked about here. So the National Institute of Mental Health does a survey every few years where they just try to kind of get some benchmarks on the mental health of the general populace. So they talk to teens, they talk to kids, they talk to adults, they talk to everybody. And every few years they put out kind of a new set of statistics just to kind of see how we're doing. One of the questions they ask respondents to rate their baseline anxiety level from 0 to 10. Just kind of like, how much stress are you carrying about living life in a general way on a day-to-day basis? For adults, this number has kind of hovered around 3.5 to 4 out of 10 for years. That's kind of where we're at, which I'm going to say is not great. I mean, that's a pretty high baseline level of anxiety. But for the first time in the early 2000s, the number that teenagers report surpassed the number that adults report on average. And now teens report that on average, their baseline stress is a 5.8 out of 10. That's bad. That's real bad. There's nothing good to say about that number. So when your teens are telling you that they're stressed at school and you're saying to them, oh, you got nothing to worry about. You don't have bills to pay, whatever. No, they really, really genuinely, on average, on the whole, are more stressed out than the average adult is in this country. And that is bad news. And it's because of all this pressure they feel to succeed and to think about adult things. I mean, they are thinking about career choices and how they're going to kind of get from this college to this internship to a job in this field when they're 14. They're not developmentally equipped to be thinking those things, let alone making those decisions. And it's literally driving them to anxiety and depression. And lastly, we need to talk about pornography. Your teen has looked at pornography. They probably looked at it today because it is everywhere and it has been very normalized in teenage culture. And, we're not talking about watching scrambled cable TV after your parents are asleep. We're not talking about finding a magazine under someone's bed and kind of stealing a glance. We're talking about unfettered access to whatever they can dream up whenever they want without anyone needing to know. Now, again, think back to what I said before. When we were kids, if we wanted to know something, if we wanted to try something out, we had to either ask or involve another human being. And that barrier made us kind of rein in a lot of our sexual fantasies, a lot of our thoughts. The idea of involving another human was enough to make us kind of say to ourselves, I don't need to do that or know about that much. And we would just stop. And this is good, right? Because part of developing as a healthy sexual human is learning about consent. It's learning about taking another person's needs and desires into consideration. And it's learning restraint, right? Not everybody wants to say yes to everything we want to say yes to sexually. So we don't always get to say yes to our sexual fantasies. But what's going on with our teens who have constant, unfettered access to pornography is that they are learning about their sexuality from pornography. And pornography is entertainment. It's not real. It's not two people having a consensual sexual relationship. It is two people being paid to entertain you. And there are some real downsides to learning about sexuality this way. And two of them I can tell you about. One is that it's very easy for teens to get addicted to pornography because it feels good to watch it and masturbate to it. And then they just can't stop. And the other thing I hear about from my clients is what they call the pornification of just their culture. Boys now expect girls to do certain things in a dating relationship, and girls expect that guys will expect certain things of them in a dating relationship, all because it's what they see in pornography. The exchange of sexual photos and content is so normalized that teens will freely and frequently exchange naked pictures of themselves, videos of themselves doing sexually explicit things. It's just kind of normal to them. And the first time I had a teen tell me this, she was telling me that she gets constantly asked by her peers, friends, and even kids in her class she doesn't know, constantly asked for naked pictures. And I was like, that can't be. Constantly, I don't believe it. And she was like, constantly, I'm telling you, multiple times a day. And I was just aghast. I was like, I can't imagine doing that. And in the middle of our 1-hour therapy session together, her phone buzzed and she took it out and she showed me and she said, look, this is a kid in my grade. I don't know him. He just asked me to send him pictures of my naked body. And he had. So it's happening. So if you have a teenage daughter, she has been asked to send naked pictures of herself to someone. She probably has. If you have a teenage boy, he's probably asked. And I'm telling you, it's happening. And the reason it's happening is because pornography has normalized that kind of flow of sexual content. So, this is the landscape that your teens are growing up in. It is not the world you grew up in. It's very different. But the crazy thing is, they need your help to navigate it. Even though it's unfamiliar to you, they need your guidance, they need your insight, they need your boundaries, and they need your limits. Otherwise, they're going to get a little bruised up by this crazy world they're growing up in. So, I'm going to do a series of videos. We're going to break down these topics, and we're going to talk about specifically what kids need from you as a parent. And we're also going to talk about the limits of what you can provide as a parent because, hey, you are not expected to do everything yourself. You are not expected to be an expert on everything yourself. And if your teen is really struggling, that's what we therapists are here for. And honestly, when teens get it, when they realize what therapy can be for them, they love it. It is an adult who works for them, who cannot talk to their parents about what they talk about, and who has to answer whatever sensitive, personal, awkward questions they have. It's great. And I love it when my teens take full advantage of therapy to kind of just help them navigate the world better. So we're going to talk about what you as a parent need to know and can do to help your teens survive and thrive in this world. And we'll talk about the limitations of what you can do and when it's a good idea to invite a trusted therapist into the mix. So thanks for joining me for this series of conversations, and I look forward to sharing with you some of the best stuff I've discovered in these last 15 years.